Welcome to part 2 of the Beginner's Guide for Proffie. If you haven't watched part 1, I highly recommend that you do because we're going to be continuing where we left off in part 1. So you should have a micro USB cable. You should have the Arduino software installed with the Proffie plugin. You've run the bootloader. You've downloaded the Proffie configuration from the Google Drive link. And you've also downloaded OS 7.14 as well as the voice pack. So we're going to be starting by having a look at the Proffie configuration file, understanding it, how it's laid out, and what do all the different lines mean. I'm not going to go into detail about every single line in the code because this is for beginners and you really don't need to know every single thing about it. I'm going to point out the important parts and just kind of give you a little rundown of how the configuration file is structured. If you remember from last time, I stored that file in a folder on the desktop called Proffie, and there it is. It's that p-txq file. Now the file extension is .h. Windows will not know what to do with a file that has .h at the end of it, so we have to tell Windows to open it with Notepad. I'm going to right click on it, choose Open With. I have to select Choose Another App, choose Notepad, and I'm going to click on Always. So that way, next time when I want to open a .h file, Windows will automatically open it with Notepad and I don't constantly have to right click it and choose Open With. You'll also notice that the .h has disappeared because it knows what to do with that file extension, and it shows the little Notepad icon right there. All right, so let's have a look at the default configuration. Make it bigger to make it easier to read. Okay, so this is the default Proffie configuration file for TXQ. You don't need to learn or know what most of this stuff means, but it does have to be there. Really, the only thing that we're concerned with are these 3 lines here at the top. If you want to learn what the other lines mean, there is a link in the description, and that'll take you to the ProffieOS documentation. And it'll explain to you what each of those lines do. And there's also optional lines and things like that. But again, for beginners, you really don't need to be messing with that or touching it. So define number of blades 1. Now, even though this is the kylose SE and it has 3 blades, it has the 2 cross guards, it's still only configured as a single blade. So we leave that as 1. Number of buttons, this is a single button, so we leave it at 1. And define volume. In the documentation, it says the value can be anywhere from 0 to 3000. It really depends on the quality of your speaker, and I wouldn't crank it to 3000 right away. If you want to try to get more volume, you want to go in slow increments. And you'd program it, upload it, test it. If it's too loud, again, you'd have to go back into the configuration file, reduce the value, upload it again, and keep going. I'm going to set it to 2000. And later on, if we find that it's not loud enough at max volume, we can increase that value to 25 or 22 and keep going from there. That's really the only 3 things that you need to make sure are set correctly in this top section. Now, if we scroll down and have a look here, you'll see a line, and this line has 2 forward slashes. Anytime you see 2 forward slashes in a line of code, everything else that is written after it is considered a comment. And a comment means that it is not read as code, it's just read as a comment. So example, I could put like this, and I could just say, hello, how's it going? And it's not going to read that as code. So that's what those double forward slashes mean. It's going to take it off because there's no point in having it there. So the reason that they have this line with the 2 forward slashes is because there are sabers out there where the USB, like the Proffie USB, is not facing the bottom. It's actually turned around and facing towards the blade. And I actually have one like that, which is the Luke episode 6 replica from N-Sabers. That one, the proffieboard is reversed. So why does it matter? It's because for gravity, tip drag, things like that, it can sense. So if the board was reversed and you had it pointing downwards and you didn't set that parameter, it would actually think that the board is tilting upward. So that's what that orientation does. Now, this particular saber has the USB facing down towards the speaker, so leaving it like that is fine. The next two defines are for twisting on, so twisting to turn on the saber or thrusting to turn it on. It's going to leave that, obviously. We're not going to touch it. And again, there are some more defines. I'll zoom out a little bit here just to make it a little easier to see the next section because it's quite big. So props, this is how the buttons work. And again, this is the default the default TXQ. Later on, I'm going to be changing this to using the FET263 prop. So the button will work differently, as well as it'll do a bunch of other cool stuff as well. So we'll work on that after, but for now, let's just get through what the TXQ default file looks like. This next section, the config presets. These are all the sound fonts that are on the saber. So each sound font will always start with this open parentheses and end with a close parentheses and a comma. So that one section of code right there tells us that it is for the sound font called animation. It shows that it plays a track. It has a comment, and that comment just says that it's the first sound font. Again, you don't have to have that in there. That could be taken out, but we'll just leave it. And then the rest of the lines, you do not have to understand what's going on there. Even I have a hard time understanding everything that is in that code because it's like, okay, what the heck am I looking at? But this is telling proffieboard the blade style, if it had a pre-on, the type of lightning block and blaster block, how to do tip drag if it's angled. Yeah, you know what? It's something that is confusing and you don't have to worry about it. Just know that it's there. And as we continue down the list, we'll see that there is the OBEP3 sound font, Darth Maul, and we're just going to keep going. And obviously they spelled that wrong. But you have to keep it the way it is for now, because the beginner is actually spelled exactly the same way on the MicroSD card, which we'll see afterwards. And we'll keep going down, and you'll see all the sound fonts here. So remember, starting with and closing with the parentheses and a comma. And DSR, so that's Dark Sith Red. And keep going. Keep going. Keep going. It looks pretty scary because, yeah, if you accidentally make one change or you add a space or something where there's not supposed to be, it will not upload the file to the proffieboard. So make sure that you don't touch it too much And don't add any spaces or extra commas or anything like that. Okay, I'm just making my way to the bottom because I want to show you guys a couple of other things here. Okay. So have a look at the Teensy sound font. Now its code is really small. This type of code is the easiest way to add a new sound font to your Saber without getting into all the crazy stuff that are in the other ones. It gives us the name of the sound font, so that's the actual sound font folder name, what track to play, again a comment that is the 23rd sound font, and then you have the code. Very simple. You have the lightsaber color. I'm pretty sure that this means like the alternate color, like flash on clash. This number here is a number in milliseconds, and that will be the outspeed, so how fast the saber will extend. And the second number is how fast it'll retract. So 300 milliseconds means that the blade will extend quickly, and then it'll retract slower. And I find that 300 milliseconds for the outspeed and 800 for the inspeed is fine. Those numbers can be adjusted if you want a slower out or if you want a quicker in, whatever. All right. So this will end the section of the sound fonts. The next section below it will be the blade config. And here is where it shows the length of the blade. And if you have a look at this value right here, 133, 133 is what you would set a 36-inch blade to. This saber came with a 32-inch blade, so that value needs to be changed. And I'm going to change that to 116. If I find that the blade is not lighting up entirely to the very tip, then I would increase that number. If I find that the tip drag effect is still not showing or it's barely showing on the very end, I can reduce that number. You basically want to get it so that the entire blade lights up, and that means that the next number you would go to that's higher, so let's just say 117 or 118, wouldn't make any difference at the end of the blade. So you could start with a shorter value like 110, and then you could slowly increment it up by 2 usually until you find that the blade is completely lit. And that way you'll get the most effect for the tip drag on the end or stab, and that's the best way to do it. But we'll start with 116 and see how that goes. The very last section of the configuration file is how the buttons are identified. Don't touch it, just leave it the way it is, it's fine. So that gives you a basic overview of what a Proffie configuration file looks like. There is a lot of code in there, but once you know what to look for and where to make changes, it's not as daunting. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close this. And before we go any further, I'm going to make a copy of this file because I'm not going to be playing too much with the original. And I still have the original in my zip folder. So if you ever do mess it up, you can just re-download it. So what I want to do is I'm going to copy this file and paste it. I'm going to rename it. And we're going to call it Kylo. And for simplicity's sake, we'll call it kylose, all lowercase, no spaces. I need to move the configuration file into the proper folder for ProffieOS 7.14. So what I do is I'm gonna copy it, or I could cut it. Sure, we'll cut it. I'm going to open up the ProffieOS 7.14 folder. And again, open that until I get to this screen here. You're going to open up the config folder and you're going to paste your kylose.h config right there. Now that we have the kylose.h configuration file in the right spot, we need to use Arduino to upload that configuration to the Saber. And the two changes were the volume, the maximum volume set to 2000, and the blade length set to 116 for a 32-inch blade. The way we do that is we go back to the ProffieOS folder. And there are a lot of folders, but you don't need to worry about any of that. We're going to scroll down till you see this file right here, ProffieOS, and it's an Arduino file. So I can double click on that and it'll open Arduino because Windows knows what to do with it. If you didn't have Arduino installed, they would have no clue. So let's double click on that. All right. In part 1, I showed you how to install the proffieboard plugin for Arduino. And I had you install version 2.2.0. The reason I did that is because I want to show you guys how to update your plugins, because there are updates that get released. We're going to go to Tools, Boards, Boards Manager. And if I click on Type All, I go to Type Updatable. And there you see it right there. So proffieboard. Currently installed is the one that we installed in the previous video, 2.2.0. But it's not the latest version, and I did that for a reason. Teachable moment. So you can see all the versions here. I can select 3.6, or I can just click Update, and it'll automatically update to the latest version. Now it's disappeared from the list. I want to see it. I'm just going to go to Type All Proffie, and now you can see that it's version 3.6.0 installed, which is the latest version. If a new version comes out in the future, you would have an update button appear right there. Good to know. All right, so this is the ProffieOS file that you use in Arduino to upload your config file. And there is only one thing that you need to edit in this file. Have a look here, and it's this line. So remember what I said about the double forward slashes? That means that every single line here is all a comment. The only one that we want to have running as code is this first line. And it kind of gives you a hint of how to do it. So it says config and then your config file name here, .h. So first we need to remove those two forward slashes. So it identifies it as code. So now it is a define. And you can see how define is kind of an olive green. That's good. Next is we need to change this. So what should that be? Well, that should be what we named it. And I named it kylose, all lowercase with no spaces. So I'm going to type that in here. You have to keep that .h, even though you might not see it in Windows. It just depends on how you have Windows set, but very important. So you have to keep the .h. All right. And that is it for the Proffie configuration. So that tells Proffie what file to use to upload to the proffieboard. The next step is you're going to go to Tools, Board, slide over to proffieboard. and we are using proffieboard V2. So we select that. Okay. Next thing, we want to scroll down to USB type, and we want to change this from serial, and we want to pick mass storage plus web USB. So what that will allow us to do is that'll allow you to access the contents of the microSD card without having to take out the microSD card and put it into an adapter. So when you plug your proffieboard using micro USB into your PC, it'll open up the contents of the microSD card, which is handy. So you don't have to constantly be taking it out, because it is tricky to pull them out because they are underneath if you have a look there. So you kind of lift it up a little bit, use tweezers, yank it out. So that's what the mass storage does. Web USB is used for the online aspect of programming Proffie. So you can connect your Proffie board through micro USB, and we'll go through this after, but you can go onto a web page and you can access your Proffie board, and you can do some customization, and it's kind of like an app, like the Force Park or Xeno Configurator app, but instead it runs through a web browser. So that's what the web USB allows you to do. So we'll click on that, and that's how we want it to look. We're almost ready to connect the Proffie board to the PC. A couple of steps before that though. First thing is you want to remove the battery, and then secondly, you want to make a backup of your microSD card. And you want to do it in that order. The best way to take out a battery is not by slamming it on a hard surface, because you could break your chassis or you could bend it. You could damage the speaker. The safest way is to hold the hilt, cup your other hand, and bang it really hard. So this is using Newton's first law of motion, which is an object in motion tends to stay in motion. So just give it a good whack. Your saber might turn on while you're doing that, but that's okay. And you can see the battery start to jiggle free there. So, okay, so I should be able to just grab it by now. Pull it out. Like so. Don't ever use any metal implements like a knife to try to pull it out with a knife, because you could short your saber. Yeah, never use a knife or anything like that. If you can do it the way I did it, it's the safest way. Next thing is to back up the microSD card. So to do that, we need to lift up the Proffie board. Just gonna pull it up a little bit. And when you're lifting it, don't hold it by the USB. Grab it by the edge of the board. And just gently wiggle until it starts to lift up a little bit, like so. So you're going to need tweezers to get your fingers in there. So grab some tweezers, pull it out, and then I'll stick it into the PC, and we'll do a backup. Show you guys here. Okay, and there it is. Put that into the micro adapter. Plug that in. All right, there we go. So I'm just going to close Arduino, minimize it. And I'm just going to have the original Proffie config file open. Just one more time to show you. If you have a look, you'll notice that OB space EP3, for example, matches up to the same folder on the microSD card. So the beginner, which was spelled incorrectly, is also spelled incorrectly on the microSD card. So it's important that the folder name matches identical to the name in quotes for each sound font. Okay. So I'm going to select all, Control A. I'm going to copy. I'll put a new folder on the desktop here. We'll call it kylose sound font, or kylose microSD card backup. And we'll paste all those sound fonts in there. Okay, now we have a backup of the microSD card. We're going to eject the microSD and put it back into the Saber. So you never pull out a microSD card or the adapter from a PC while it's loaded, because you could corrupt the card. So you always want to right click on it and choose eject. I'm having a look at the microSD adapter. The light is off, so I can safely remove it now. Take the card and we'll push it back in. All right, back to Arduino. Take your micro USB cable and have a look at the way the micro USB port is oriented, because again it is trapezoidal. So see that there. And I'm going to lift it enough to fit in my cable. Like so. Now this is probably not the best cable to use because it has that big piece for holding on, like right here. But that's okay. I'll just leave it for now. You can also get micro USB cables that have a right angle, so that plug it in and it goes straight up. Those work, I'm assuming, very well. I did order one a while ago, but it never arrived, so I got a refund. But I should be fine just like this. And now I'm going to plug that into my USB port. It's going to make a sound, and that's completely normal. And it doesn't sound very good because there's really no power going into it. But don't get freaked out. It will make a sound, and it actually played a Soundfont intro, and it's fine. Okay, I'm going to put down this hilt like so. My PC beeped, or made that tone like it detected something was attached. So now we need to make sure that Arduino sees the ProffieBoard connected. And the way we do that is we have to go down to port. If you have a look, it has already selected COM9 ProffieBoard in quotes. The COM port might be different on your computer. It really just depends on how it's set up and what ports are installed and your motherboard. But mine is COM9. So that's what I want to see. Now, if it had selected something like COM3, I would obviously go down and choose COM9 ProffieBoard. You should have ProffieBoard written next to it in brackets. Okay, so we'll select COM9. And what I like to do is I like to click on Get Board Info. So that is actually reading the information off of the Proffie board. So that tells me that yes, the Proffie board is being detected and we are good to start the upload process. In Arduino, there are two buttons at the top here. One is verify and one is upload. Verify means that it will go through the lines of code in that kylose.h file. It'll go through all lines of code and make sure that the code is correct before trying to upload it to the Proffie board. Because if you click upload and there's errors, it's still not going to upload. But really, I like to just use verify first, just because it's quicker than trying to upload and then finding out there's an error. So we're going to click on verify and let's see what happens. It's been a while since I've done this, but it should do something. All right, that's fine. We've got a fatal error. I want you to see this. All right, so the fatal error I'm getting on line 27. So that's what that number means. This is a very handy thing to learn because you are going to get error messages, trust me, because it's just part of the nature of it. Like, you're not going to get it perfect every single time you make a change or you upload a new sound font. So having a look at the code right here, 27 means line 27 of the kylose.h file. Let's have a look and go into the kylose. Close the other one here. Okay. So how do you find line 27? Well, you don't have to go and count them. If you have a look at the bottom where my mouse is, I'm just going to circle that area. It tells you right there, line 1. So there's line 27. So it's looking for this file in the props folder and it can't find it. That's what it's saying here. No such file or directory. And that's because we didn't bother to copy the rest of the configuration from TXQ. So we need to just get that one file from the original configuration, which is that TXQ folder. It was in the props, and it was saber underscore SA22C underscore buttons dash perk. So you know what I'm going to do just to be safe? I'm going to take both of these files, the one that's dash perk and just the one that says buttons. Copy those. We're going to go to ProffieOS, so the ProffieOS 7.14, and go to the props folder, paste them. Okay, well, it already had that one, so I'm going to skip that file. All right, so now it has that file that it's complaining about was missing. So I'm just going to close this. Again, open Arduino. And you can make your log smaller or bigger, so I'm just going to kind of have it like that. And we'll click verify again and see what happens. Compiling sketch. It's a good sign. And on the right here, you'll see that you have this bar moving across. So that's what we want to see. And let's see if there are any more errors in the file. It'll tell us. So this is what we want to see. Sketch uses, and it gives you amount of bytes, 89% of the program storage space. Maximum is 262, 144 bytes. So that means that they didn't find any more errors. You can ignore the line above it about Warning, memory region, SRAM2 not declared. Don't worry about it. But we want to see that sketch uses blah, 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 blah. So your Proffie configuration, in this case, it's called the kylose.h, can only be a certain size. So the more sound fonts you add and the more code that you add into that file, the file gets bigger and bigger. So right now we're using 89% of that storage space that's built onto the proffieboard itself. We're not talking about the storage on the 32 gigabyte microSD card. That's something different. So you can load your microSD card with like 50 or 60 sound fonts, but it's unlikely that you're going to be getting every single sound font to be recognized on the proffieboard at once, because you have to add code for every single sound font. And if you had 60 sound fonts, you're probably going to go over that threshold of 262,144 bytes. So keep that in mind. All right, so it verified, it's happy. We can upload this to the proffieboard. So now I'm going to click on the upload button and watch down here in that black section, and you'll see what happens. So again, compiling sketch. It checks it again for errors. And we're going to want to see these little equal signs. You'll see as soon as it's done this. All right. So this happens quite a bit. Cannot open DFU device. This is what I was talking about in part 1 about having to run that bootloader a second time because it won't upload. So this happens. So what I'm going to do is I guarantee you it's still... Oh, it lost. Look at that. It completely lost it. Because I hit get board info and nothing happens. It's as if it disconnected it because it did. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug it from my PC. I'm going to close Arduino. I'm glad you're seeing this because these are issues that I run into all the time. I'm going to go back to my downloads. And there's my Proffie DFU setup. I'm going to run that again. Install it again. All right, close it. Close my downloads. Go back to ProffieOS 7.14 into the subfolder. Go down to the ProffieOS Arduino, open it up again. All right, it already has that define set because we've already set it, so we don't have to do that again. We just have to plug in our USB cable one more time. It made a sound. And before we hit upload or verify, tools. Okay, so again, it selected COM9 proffieboard. So it detects the proffieboard. I click get board info. It's what I want to see. I want to see a serial number and VID, PID. So it's talking. We'll click upload again, see what happens. If it errors out this time, then I'm going to be rebooting my PC because that's the last thing to get it to work. But we'll see what happens. So have a look over here and you see that green bar moving. Isn't it fun to program Proffie?
He's the best. I love it. It's fantastic.
All right. So it still says cannot open DFU device. At this point, I'm just going to close Arduino and I'm going to reboot my PC and we're going to go right back into Arduino and try it again. So I've rebooted my PC And let's try it again. All right, COM9 proffieboard detects it. Click upload. And hopefully it'll take it this time. That's what we want to see, is we want to see this and not that DFU error. So we have download, and you can see the little progress bar here, 20, 21. Yeah, if you're having issues getting past that part where it says cannot open device, reinstall that bootloader program, restart your PC, try a different USB port on your computer as well, and just keep trying over and over until it finally will work. It could be a pain. Not as much as a pain as Zadig though, so I still prefer doing it this way. All right, so file downloaded successfully. So it's uploaded the kylose.h config file to the proffieboard. Close Arduino for a second here. And now we have the mass storage enabled. If I unplug the USB cable and plug it back in, we give it a little bit of time and it will open up a new drive letter, and that'll show you the contents of the microSD card, and you can easily add new sound fonts without having to take out the microSD card. Okay, it did take a little bit of time for it to finally detect it, but there it is. And this is the first time we've done it, so the next time I do it, it'll be faster to load this. So yeah, isn't that nice? So it's a little slower than taking out the microSD card and putting it directly in the PC, but it is a lot easier. And just like before we unplug the Saber, we want to make sure that we eject the drive. Like so. All right, so it has been programmed now with a higher max volume and a 32-inch blade. So I'm now going to disconnect the USB cable from the board. I'll kind of push the board back down. Take the battery. Make sure, obviously, that your positive side goes up. I've reattached the blades to the kylose.h. Turn it on. So the volume is louder now, the maximum volume. It's still letting up the whole blade with 116 LEDs. I can't show you the tip drag or the melt function because the button files, for whatever reason, they don't want to seem to recognize with the OS 7.14. If I were to stick with the original TXQ package, that Proffie Configuration, and use that one, which is probably OS 6, and just change the blade length, then all the buttons and the effects would work the same way. So right now we're kind of halfway in between a completely functional Proffie 7.14 and something that's not quite there. But I'm going to stop it here because we went through a lot today, a lot of information learned. If you're having any problems or if you have any questions, drop them in the comment section. I'll answer you as quickly as I can. Till next time, I've been your host, the Frugal Jedi. Thank you for watching. May the Force be with you.